Good afternoon, everyone. Want to welcome you to our first book for lunch for the season, our September book for lunch. We did start it a little bit late so that we could get Dennis Garcia here because he was coming from California and wasn't available. So we thought, well, we're going to have to change our book for lunches up a couple times this year. So we're going to change it up for him. So that's why we made it the 17th. In October, we have Kansas Humanities sponsoring the Kansas, I won't say poet laureate because they didn't put that on their Facebook, but Dennis Etzel Jr. is a Kansas poet, author, and works for Washburn. So he is going to be bringing our book for lunch and collections of his poetry. And then after book for lunch, he'll do a workshop, which I'll tell you about. That's October 1st, so that'll be normal, okay? November is going to be the second week in November, and that's because the Kansas Library Association has their annual conference, and a whole bunch of us are going. And so we won't be back until that Friday, late Friday night on the whatever it is. So we will have Zach Diamante come as an author, and yeah, you'll enjoy him. And then in December, we have another Kansas Humanities speaker, Jose Faust, and he's going to be talking about the dynamics of immigration and visual art and poetry, a little bit more art and poetry and things like that, and then how different cultures and things will be brought together in culture. So it'll be fun. I think it will be enjoyable. Anybody that speaks for Kansas Humanities, I find has a rich heritage and something to bring to us. And that'll be on our normal December 3rd. Okay. Next week, we have a Medicare seminar, and it is being done by a gentleman named Steve Maskell. And he is an insurance salesman plus Medicare advisor. So he's going to tell us about signing up for Medicare, regular Medicare, supplementals, and our drug plans. If for some reason you want to talk to someone about what the costs are of those different plans in Kansas, you can sign up and talk to him. It doesn't mean you have to sign up with him or take his advice. You can just get some information from him. He would come back to Colby at some point and do that. We normally don't have somebody come like that, but there's nobody in Kansas in Colby that we know of that gives us that kind of advice. So he was sitting in the office and was saying, and I'm like, well, you really know your stuff. So we decided to do that. And then in October, Citizens Medical Center and Family Center for Healthcare will bring another Medicare workshop. And they're also very good, but they're gonna do it from a different angle. They won't have the ability to probably tell you some of the figures and stuff, but they'll give you a better overview for Kansas law, Kansas Medicare, federal Medicare, and then the supplementals and things. And they provide a lot of paperwork that you can take home. So, okay, and you might even meet some community care people that would help you with signing up or something. So October is our poets, and then we're going to do a poetry workshop afterwards. It's 1:30 here, and Dennis will be helping us with writing poetry. And in 2015, we had a poetry workshop, and we started a poetry club. And out of that, we have seen what we're seeing one book published. Rich Hawkins just started writing poetry, and he combined his knowledge of the prairie and knowledge of the poem and background, and he started using his cell phone to write poetry on just writing down thoughts and words. And so we are now publishing a book for him, and it will be published October, and I think it'll be November. Marla at yours going to do this. But it's going to be a beautiful collection about the prayer, about his home, about how the prairie healed him, from his time in Vietnam. It'll be like 12 chapters, and it's some of us, Paul Steele, myself, others, Carol Barnes, Carol being the real brilliant one, because she was an English teacher at CTC, helped us put it all together. So I want you to know that if you want to learn how to do poetry, it's a great way to start. And I can even write poetry now on my phone. It's amazing. So there you go. You can write it on paper too. But I seem like I never have a piece of paper around when I get these interesting thoughts. And that's a more creative way of reading about this, because if I did it, it'll be out there. Now, I want you guys to know that we have some very talented staff, which I know you already know. But on our website, we have, I call it a podcast, it's also a webcast because it's filmed. And Vi Cornett, right here, in the middle, and Katie have been working on our self-indulgence podcast or webcast. And you will find it on our website, and soon it will be on Facebook and Instagram. It comes out about the 15th of the month. If you want to get noticed when it comes up, we can just send you an email. You can sign up for it, or you can just go on our website or start looking for it. There are 4 up there. The first 2, they say those were kind of our trials, and we did better at it. So yeah. And then also we have a quarterly newsletter, and it has English on one side and then Spanish on the other. It's not really hard English. We wanted to make sure that all of our partners in our Spanish classes could also read the English. So we were using that. We sent it to the chamber and things. That'll be on our website. It's on through online resources. It's also a print version like this. For this one. About 6 pages, really nicely done. Vi does it, and sometimes some other people will submit articles and things. So that's kind of fun. Our children's programming, we have story time, play with purpose, baby and me. Now, kind of for birth to 18 months, it'll be each Wednesday at 9:15. You do not have to sign up for it now. So if you have a grandbaby or something, your grandbaby, or your preschoolers, your toddlers, play with birds will be a sign up, just because we can only get so many kids in. All the plays to be equipment. Our youth activity center is for 3rd through 8th grade. And it's Monday through Thursdays, 1 to 5, Fridays, 1 to 4, 4 to 5. If you know somebody who has kids at that age group, they're down here. Okay? And then remember that as you can find things on our website, on our Facebook page, on our catalog. This is out. We do have books on Hoopla for digital audio or regular reading. We have already library, and we have English classes, and I didn't move that up, but English classes on Thursday. You can buy those. And the person doesn't have to always be there. We have some people that are there every week, some that can't because of their work. And so she is able to bring them into the class. So if you know somebody who said, oh, I can't do it in my schedule, have them talk to Vi and see if there's a way that they can start coming and being part of that group, part of that class. And then about it. So let me bring to you Dennis Garcia. Put that away, and we're going to bring him to This is now our wireless receiver, so it takes a minute. Hey. Let me turn that one on. Just make it work. Okay. Oh my. Signal is waiting. Do we have any idea how to fix that? Garrett, do we have any idea? Should I unplug it? This is brand new. We got it last month. And we've been using it for an hour. So,
While you do that, I can introduce
yes, you
myself.
introduce yourself.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming in. It's an honor and a pleasure to be back in Kobe. I played a high school football game here just a few years ago. And so it's good to be back. I have been Kobe before. A little bit of myself. I was born and raised in Green City. My parents, my father was born in Fulton in the early 20s, and my mother was born in Dodge City. And after high school in Garcia City, I went to college at the University of Mexico. And after that, I went to law school at the University of Kansas. And after that, going to law school, I worked in Garden City as an attorney for 4 years. And then I moved to Arizona for 30. And I continued to work as an attorney, but I also taught public high school. I taught government 16 years, so I had both careers going. And when I retired in 2014 and live in San Diego with my lovely wife Celeste. So we're onto the right, you're taking the photographs and taking control and doing a good job of making sure I don't trip over myself. And I wrote this book, finished writing it in 4, and I have to recognize 2 individuals who helped me a great deal, along with my publisher, the University of Kansas Press. First individual is my wife, Celeste. She is a great researcher, and we looked at hundreds of documents, census records, military records, birth records, death records, divorce records, you name it, and she's excellent at writing that and putting it together. The other person is second cousin of mine. She lives in Riverside, California. She and her husband came across a cache of negative photographs a second cousin of mine had taken. He was a real camera buff, but he didn't get them all developed before he passed away. And when they were taking care of the estate, my cousin Mickey, she'll be in one of these photographs. They came across these negatives, and processing them the old way. It took a while. And so there are 36 photos in the book, and probably about 20 of them are from that stack of development they found and brought to life. So it was kind of a real family effort to come up with the book. This photograph is actually the end of the story of the book. The book's about 3 generations of my mother's family, great-grandmother, grandmother, and my mom. And it takes into account the lives that they led and how they managed to lead families through difficult times and to successful times. So this is kind of the end of the story. My mother and my 9 siblings. This was taken in Gage Park in Topeka. My younger brother graduated from law school as well, AU. He's on the far end with the glasses. Handsome part of him is struggling. But so this is the end of the story. And The story really begins with the first main character, my great grandmother, was Candelaria. She lived in central Mexico. She lived, was born and raised on a hacienda. And the haciendas in Mexico are, in those days, she was born in 1865, are kind of rugged businesses and institutions that we saw here in the States. Ranching, farming, very hard work, everybody knows it. And on top of all of that, the hard experiences she had as a child, she was a child bride, got married at age 15, very common back in those times. And about 1900, 1910 for sure, Mexican Revolution got underway. And a lot of innocent people were suffering, and there was a large migration to the United States. And Valeria, who wanted to take care of her family, she lost a total of 7 children in childbirth. Back in those days, mortality was very high. She said, enough, I want to go someplace where children are safe. So she convinced her husband to take, at the time, her first husband died after about 14, 15 years of marriage, and she remarried. And with her second husband, my great grandfather, they took the train from central Mexico down here. This heavy dark with all the dots is the railroad that went through central Mexico. There were American businesses as well. There were companies who were interested in building the railroad, good for commerce and such. So that's how they got to El Paso. And they were there for 4 years. Again, life very difficult. My grandfather started out as a digger, Santa Fe. And eventually they sent him to Dodge, up through New Mexico and into Dodge City. My grandmother, grandfather got to Dodge in 1910. So she is a central character in the story of the book, and that's how they got to Dodge. Now, farm life, ranch life was difficult, hardship, and when she got to Dodge, this is the village where the workers lived in Dodge when he first started arriving about 1905, 1910. And you can tell that from this picture in the background. Of course, the houses were abandoned railroad cars. The single men lived in tents. A lot of men with children and families. They got the abandoned railroad cars. Later on, they built shanties, small shacks, essentially made of throwaway wood that didn't want anymore. And they built homes. Again, very difficult. My guess is that some of you here have grandparents or grandparents who can tell you very similar stories. Life wasn't easy in 1900 on that place, and housing was meager and those sorts of experiences. They had it to Dodge, even though my grandfather, great grandfather went to the railroad. No electricity, no plumbing, no running water. Everyone had a office. For sanitation, they had a big pit where they would dump garbage. Roads were unpaved. This pump here was one of 2 that railroad provided for the families. And so when they needed water for whatever purpose, cooking, bathing, you take your container out there and pump the water out. I'm sure your parents, the grandparents, oh yeah, of course, what else? And so it was very difficult. And one of the things that you might notice that, the kids are kind of playing. There was no assigned playground. At the start of 10, there was a school for them. Their playground was the railroad. And there was an empty lot next to where the what they call village was. This picture of this map was taken, or this map was created in 1915. And this is on the south side of the tracks in Dodge City. This is east, west, north, south. And the Rock Island also had a railroad going through Dodge. So there was lots of traffic. And the village was located between that line of tracks and the roundhouse where the engines and train cars were serviced. There are remnants of the roundhouse still there in Dodge. And you can see the proximity, how close they were. So for the kids, especially the young boys, the railroad was their playground. The Passion Connection was their playground. And so it was a very difficult time. This is a picture of the front of the roundhouse. You can see where the trains are getting lined up. This was taken probably about 1920. And on the other side of that back wall, that is where the village was located. So that the workers right there work. The Santa Fe liked them, kept them easy to get access with the workers. Workers didn't have to worry about getting to work. You just walked over. There was a tunnel too that they used to get into the north side of the project. In 1915, the Catholic Church built a chapel and school. And I put those items in the book so that you hopefully we can get a background of what life was like for my family, for my great grandmother, my great grandfather. And of course, many Mexicans are deeply religious Catholics, and so the church put up a structure, meager, but it was a church, and it was something that helped the community stay together, keep their customs, religious customs and beliefs and rights. And that was in about 1915. This was the inside of the church. Again, no electricity, so there was a group of women, including my great grandmother, who would go to the chapel and light up the chapel, all the candles that provided light for the interior. They had this coal power heater there, and of course they warm up the church, burning all the coal. And you can see the very small setting. But again, I want to give you the visual, give you a sense of what they were experiencing back in those times. And to get back earlier to the kids, this is one of my mom's first grandparents. This picture was taken about 1920. And you'll notice he's standing in the railroad tracks, like their trackway. There's a train in the back. And again, it highlights what the kids had to do growing up. A lot of the families had gardens. They had enough space behind, at least to on the side, to put in a garden. And again, kids get I'm in the book so that you can understand what the kids were doing. This picture is of my cousin Michaela, the one who provided the photographs. She was about 10 years old. And it was cold, obviously, in Kansas, and you know. And so, but this was their life, even for the kids that were not toddlers. This is one of my great grandmother's sons. So I think that makes him a great uncle of mine. But I wanted to show you, this picture was taken in the village, but I wanted you, if you look closely at the wood, that fence, hope I'm not blocking your way there, move over here. That's not, thinly cut, fine wood, it can go down, it's got wood, but that's what you do, you, in those days, you made the best of what you had. He was a carpenter, and that's what he did for a living, for the railroad and for the community. So that was life in the village until about 1941. And this is a photograph of my mother, right? My grandmother, Viola on the left. This picture was taken right after my grandmother's high school graduation, 1938 in Dodge City High. It was very rare for all kids, no matter your background, your cultural background, or especially the young boys and men, not to go to high school, not to finish high school. They went to 8th and 9th grade, and they went to work, especially during the Depression time. So it was a big deal. And I also wanted to illustrate my great-grandmother on the Hacienda, Candelaria, no school. Her ancestors, my ancestors, for 250, 300 years, that's the way they lived in Mexico. No, the kids were, no schools for the kids. If you were a wealthy hacienda owner, then your kids got education, got medical care. But my great-grandmother decided to leave Mexico and come to the United States. She was taking a step that nobody else had. That took a lot of courage. And so I describe that more details in the book. My grandmother, she raised in the village after age 6. And again, working hard, helping maintain the family. She was a teenage bride as well, and a teenage mom for my mom. So again, imagine how hard it was without those comforts of housing and school, without medical care and all of that. But like my great-grandmother, my mom was taking that big step for the family by going to school, finishing school, and going to high school. A handful of Mexican kids, more females than males, went to the high school and finished, but literally a handful, very few. This is my grandmother, and probably at about age 35, this was probably just before World War II. And she also, in raising her family, was starting to do things outside of the home as far as family and getting their kids to school. Worked hard, but she was taking that step of new culture, new language, and trying to make sure that her kids, she had 10 survived. She lost the 3 that were sure of at childbirth within a year. But the point is that she worked hard to make sure her sons and daughters advanced and took advantage of the sacrifices of Candelaria and herself. 1941, December 7th, everybody knows what happened on that day. It changed the world forever. And that included the Mexican community in the village. I put this photograph in the book so you kind of see the transition. We had kids not finishing grade school, but when the war came, the Mexican village produced at least a dozen soldiers served in World War II. 3 or 4 did not come back. This signaled a change for the culture. This was a real reach out for the Anglo community to say, hey, guys, we need you. You come and report. You're gonna defend the country you live in. And they did. My grandmother and her oldest son, Salvador, his wife was Salvador. So, it was a start. It was also the end of the village, the Mexican village. It was start. The end. With the railroad, they were switching from coal to oil, and they wanted room for their oil tanks. So they told the people in the village, you gotta move and go to the other side and get into Dodge. So those kind of world events push the cultures together. And kind of the result of that, one of the sidelines says, this young woman reading a Hollywood magazine. That's my mom in 1943. The reason we were able to determine the year is we were able to figure out when this issue came out. But she, her sisters, they were like kids are today. What's happening in Hollywood? Who's doing this? Who's doing that? Movies, dancing, big men, Glenn Miller, they love to dance. It's love to dance. But so you start to see where the cultures were mixing. After the war, the Mexican communities, Garden and Dodge, started a community organization that focused on education with the American GI Forum. It was World War II veterans who organized and led the organization, but it wasn't just the men, women were involved as well. They were working for making sure the kids were getting to school, getting higher education, and getting employment. So the women, my mother especially, were very active in moving that. So I put that in the books so that readers could see, things have changed. Work changes a lot, and this was one of those things. And after the war, and they started in the middle 40s and late 50s, or late 40s, early 50s, the community, Mexican community in Dodge, basically was doing what everyone in the United States with their family, their church organizations. This is a confirmation. My grandmother on the left, your godmother, the young lady next to her, and that's one of my aunts, and read that with her godmother. In the night when my great grandmother and my grandmother growing up, women did not play sports. You're not even supposed to be around boys and men. Your job is to be in the house and help your mom keep the house in order and cook meals. But after the war, there was this participation more going to school. The women were involved in all the activities. A lot of the women worked in the war effort, making parachutes, putting together medical kits. My mother worked on airplanes in Garden City at the Air Force Base there. So you can see that coming out. Dance, music is a big part of the Mexican culture, but again, it's not just Mexican music. That could be a Glenn Miller band. They did all kinds of music, and they were living life like we wanted. A couple getting married, dancing, getting to know each other. This photograph, I'm blowing up down. Here in this, you can see the roundhouse when it was still standing. The village was shut down in 1955. So this picture is probably 1951. They had put in the oil tank. You can barely see the corner of it right there. And this empty space where the houses that were raised in order to put the tank in there. And so everyone knew that the village days were numbered. The blue arrow was the Arkansas Road, by Dodge. And, it was that close to the village. My, grandmother liked to, go by walking on the bank with the kids, and so did Olivia. Mid-50s, the GI was very active. Again, this was a 4th of July parade in Dodge. They had their own float. There was the GI Forum, and the community was working, pursuing education, civil rights, getting involved, being a part of the community. A lot of them men, military service, war veterans, and so it would be part of the, you might see the parade today in many communities on the 4th of July. A Queen contest, fiestas, and 4th of July celebrations. But as I said earlier, the women were not just Queen candidates, they were working hard and working in these organizations. This is a photograph of leadership of the GI Forum from Dodge. There was a women's auxiliary part of the GI Forum. There was a youth auxiliary for the GI Forum. So at the main part, the women had the auxiliary youth organizations, all focusing on trying to get people educated, get the kids educated, get good employment opportunities, and have good relations in Dodge and Garden. This picture, again, we can't blow it up today, but it's a picture of my mother that was in the middle 60s. By then, she had her 10 children, and getting us through school. She was very active in church organization, school organization, and I put this in the book again just so the reader can see the progress that's being made and the activities that communities were taking to improve themselves. And the rest of the article lists that she did. Just before she finally left Garden City after my time, she actually served on the school board of Garden City. So again, that was my hope for the book, that I could record what individuals in my family did and all the crises and challenges they had and overcame, but also our history, our country's history, how it's grown together, how we deal with each other. And so that was my purpose. And I try to use the photographs to give you a background, a format, structure, think about what was happening as you read the book if you have not yet read it. And if you haven't read it, hopefully this explains the story. So that is a photo presentation I have. If you have questions, now's the time to ask, and I will try to answer them as best I can.
I have two questions. You talked about church. Were you not allowed to, I'm sure Dodge City had a Catholic church. You couldn't attend it or go to that church or?
Well, and I addressed that in detail in the book. No, but I'm trying to accentuate what it was. Dodge City had part of the Wichita Diocese, and they had a Sacred Heart parish for the folks in Dodge. When the first Mexican arrivals got to Dodge, they would attend Mass in the church. It was about a quarter to a half mile away. They walk up a hill. Wintertime, I don't have to explain wintertime to folks, you know what it is. It's hard to get up one about. And so after a couple of years, the church had some of the urging of the members decided to put a church or a chapel in the village. And that was that one that we showed. And a priest from Mexico who was fleeing during the revolution was sent to Dodge, and he was the pastor almost the entire life. And so the Mexican community had their church. It was not unusual for some members of the village to go to Sacred Heart, but it was a little unusual for a Sacred Heart parishioner to cross the tracks and go into the village. No restroom, no drinking fountain, outhouse. I think through the years, by 1940, 45, they started to make those kind of improvements. But that's what, and there had been promises to build another church. And finally, after the war, in late 49, 50, the diocese told the parishioners, if you want a church, we'll pay for it. We'll get the land for the church in your neighborhood. And that's what happened. And then they put in Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. In 1953, I think it was finally consecrated, dedicated.
I think that's unusual. I mean, it's such need for wages that the diocese couldn't help you build it. But then I'm just saying that. The other question I have is, you did so much for the railroad. So why did they come punching you out of that area for all the work that you had done? Couldn't they go 2 miles the other way to put in these tanks? Well, it just is.
It is easier, cheaper, just to send the grader in there, knock it all down, and make room. Now, they did get a notice that they were going to knock down the houses and put in. They had one of those cars like you see in the old movies with a speaker on it and drove it around. You have to leave. So they did a good job of giving people plenty of time to get out, but they did not do a good job of helping them to go live. Yeah, and there might have been 1, 2 houses that had been put together in the village that were worth picking up and actually moving it on the other side of the tracks. But it's just 2. And there was one. Yeah, and one point I'll make back on the church, and I explain it detail in the book. The church had money and was building other places. So the question is, I'm sorry. Yes.
So your family moved to California. Do you still have family in Garden City, Dodge area since?
Well, yeah, it's a little bit lengthy. I'll try to make it short. So my mom married my dad in 1903. He was from Garden City. She was from Dodge. And the Mexican communities communicated with each other and found partners to marry. So my house that my mother lived in, when she got married in 1943, she was in until 1991, I believe. And my father had passed away in 85, and she moved to a sister in Texas school. And so my dad was one of 6 Garcia boys. They were known. Among them, they had 48 children.
Good.
I'm not counting my mother's side. That's just my dad's side. So I can literally say, I have cousins all over the United States, and 1 or 2 live in Vermont. But if you drove across the country from here to Washington, D.C., you could go about 8 hours and you'd have a cousin to stay with. So I left Garden City when I graduated from high school, went to New Mexico, and then I actually went to Texas and lived there for a couple of years before I went back to KU Law School. And then I went to Arizona and California. I have a brother who lives in California. My sisters gravitated, I had 7 sisters. they gradually moved towards Las Cruces, Mexico, where my mother ended up. And so, the Mexico, Arizona, but a larger family like Mickey's family, lives in California. My great uncle, my grandfather's brother on the previous side, Doug, he lived in California for years. So, yeah. We still have Kansas people, Wichita. A lot of my first cousins, my uncles moved from Garden City to Wichita to work in the plants and Boeing. And they had a number of children as well. And I'd say the most of them are in Wichita. I have one niece living, one niece and one cousin still living in Garden City. What's that? Yes. Well, people in dots. And so, we've had about 13 or 14, family members go and graduate from, University of Kansas and a couple from Kansas State. So we are part of the community. Any other questions? Yes. There were two things that were going on that pushed for that led to the becoming. The first that was going on was that Mexico was fighting a revolution, a bloody revolution, really ugly stuff. And so many of the people fled Mexico to escape being killed. If you were a teenager on my mother's side, we had two teenage sons. We spoke with the rebels, the government wrote here and said, your boys are coming with us. And say, no, we're not going. Well, you come with us or we're going to shoot them. So to avoid that happening to my uncles, my great uncles, that was one reason they came. Second reason was 1918, 1917, the United States got involved in a war in Europe. Millions of men went into industry in the United. We need workers. We need somebody to build the firearms, the military. We need somebody to work in the steel mills and that sort of thing. And cattle industry, mining industry, agricultural industry, they needed workers. And so they went to Mexico, literally, and recruited people. The Santa Fe Railroad made a decision. I explain a little bit in the book. We want our workforce to be from Mexico, and let's send recruiters into Mexico to find men with families. Because we bring them back, they'll be more stable because they have to take care of their families. If you go get 3 or 4 or 5 single guys, who knows? You might have them for a year or 2 years, maybe 6 months, they're gone. All the money you spent to bring them here and train them, that's wasted money. So those two things were the big things that drove United States industry wanted Mexican workers. Mexican workers wanted to escape poverty in Mexico and death, so they came. And I might add, I did have, we just discovered on my grandmother's side, some families who were aristocratic, they had done well. They had others and maids. But when the revolution came, they wanted to get out of Mexico too, because the rebels were after them. So those were the two principal factors.
Very good.
Anything else? We have books available. I've written one other book. I just have one copy left about my cousin Ernie, but Las Madres. We have so for $25 cash or credit card. We'll accept. I'm glad to sign it to however you want. Thank you so much.
Thank you.